Okay, hello. I'm going to be reviewing this new Marvel movies, the Thunderbolts. I'm very worried about the current state of Marvel movies. I guess I'll start with that. Have not been very great lately, specifically Captain America Brave New World, which came out this February, was really bad. Just horrible to look at, had a terrible plot, felt like it had been rewritten by a dozen different people that were not communicating with each other about the changes they were making. Also felt like it barely had a director. Like it was so directed by committee and so like lifeless and pointless and like emotionless and had no personality to it. And that's how I felt about a lot of Marvel movies lately. And as a result, kind of soured on them. I think a lot of people recently have soured on Marvel movies in general. And that's why this latest slate of Marvel movies is very important for this brand to like really hit it out of the park with a lot of these releases, starting with Thunderbolts in July. We have Fantastic Four, and then just next year we have a huge team up movie in the form of Avengers Doomsday. And it feels weird to say that because we were not really ramping up to like a big team up. It feels very rushed. Basically, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, by extension, really have to be great and really have to like gain people's trust back of Marvel movies. So there's a lot of emphasis being put on Thunderbolts that would not usually be put on a film that is like a small scale team up of people who've been in side plots of other Marvel movies. And before I review this like objectively as a movie, I first off want to talk about it within the context of the MCU. Which, looking at it from that perspective, I'm a lot more positive on the movie. In direct contrast to the past several years of Marvel movies, this actually feels like a movie, which is a very low bar. But the people look like they were in the same room when they were filming scenes together. It feels like they actually filmed on location and not like everything on a soundstage on a green screen. It feels like there was a director who had a vision and an idea for a story to tell. And it also feels like there was one script that they wrote, and then they said, this is the script we are doing. And then they weren't like constantly rewriting it in pre-production and during production and post-production. And then like they're not massive rewrites or reshoots. Also visually, this movie looks really great. The cinematography is very solid. Again, has like that grit and that physicality and that practicality to it that makes it look so great, which also translates very well into the action scenes. Very well choreographed, very well staged, really makes good use of the specific powers that these people had. I thought in particular Ghost is being utilized really well. Her like invisibility powers are very fun to see on screen. And in general, I thought the performances were pretty solid. Florence Pugh stands out here as the lead. She's charming, she's fun, she's also really like committed to the action scenes. But is also someone who is a very talented actress who is like really working hard. There's a couple scenes where she's really acting, and I think those are the best parts of the movie. Another standout is Lewis Pullman, who is playing Bob/Sentry. It's kind of the emotional core of this film and delivers a performance that has some comedic relief to it, but is also like really mature and kind of dark for a Marvel movie. This leads me into the tone of the movie as well as the themes. This movie is diving into like depression and loneliness and what it feels like to be unfulfilled, as well as like trauma and regret that can like linger within someone. And they kind of use that as the connective tissue that unites all the Thunderbolts, which I thought was really smart. But tonally, I don't know if the movie balances like the darkness of a lot of the themes of this movie with like the generic Marvel formula. It doesn't help that this movie isn't particularly funny. I think David Harbour is kind of the epitome of this issue, and not to like critique everything about David Harbour's performance, because I think he's doing some really great stuff here. There's actually a scene near the back half that is like the emotional climax of the film, that is a scene just between him and Florence Pugh that is genuinely really emotionally affecting, and I thought was one of the best parts of the movie. But besides that scene, he is for the most part being designated to like delivering Marvel-like humor and basically just screaming. And some of these jokes land, but it's like a, 1-to-1 missed hit ratio, and that's really how it feels throughout the entire film. 50% of the jokes I would say land flat, and then the other 50% just like were lightly amusing and like got a light chuckle out of me, which kind of harms some of the banter between the characters. It doesn't help that there's a lot of like exposition going on in this film. There's about 4 different times when all the Thunderbolts are together where they just like talk about their pasts in like very obvious kind of clunky exposition-y ways. Those are definitely some of my least favorite parts of the movie. But some of the banter is pretty good. I think generally they have really great chemistry together as performers. Wyatt Russell is really great in this movie. He's very unlikable in some regards, but he leans into that unlikability quite a bit, which I think works for what the movie is about. It's about like these antisocial people who think of themselves as being unlikable or unlovable. Someone I really didn't like in this movie was Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who I just always thought felt out of place within the MCU. Her character is not very well written here either. She's like kind of riding the line between being pure evil and being like sort of an anti-hero politician, and I don't think the writing does a good enough job of like picking a side between that, because she does like some genuinely detestable things, but the movie like kind of lets her off the hook for it for whatever reason. I also find that these Marvel movies are like so obsessed with the political ramifications of having superheroes, and in some sense I guess it's kind of interesting, but like not in the way that they do it. The scenes of Julia Louis-Dreyfus just like being a politician are really not very interesting to me. So yeah, these are just like slight issues I have with the movie. The tone is a little bit uneven. Some of the performances I think are a little weaker than others, and some of the dialogue is too exposition heavy. But these are mainly nitpicks, and for the most part, I think this is a return to form for Marvel. Pretty fun movie that also isn't scared to get like deeply emotional, and unlike other Marvel movies, rarely like undercuts its emotional moments with a cheap joke. They do it a couple of times, but specifically in the third act, they are definitely like leaning into the darker aspects and are not really like resorting to cheap humor to like alleviate that tension, which I think was really smart on their part. It also speaks to a deliberate choice to make this film feel less like other Marvel movies, which I think is what made Marvel so great. Is like there was a distinct formula, you know, early on, but every single movie deviated from that formula in some regard. They also are all very standalone. Thunderbolts is obviously setting up some things in the future, but is less concerned with setting things up and is more concerned with just telling a good story. Lots of great character moments. I think both Yelena and Bob have great character arcs. The relationship that really matters in this movie is the one between those two characters, and Pugh and Pullman pull that off really well. And generally, I think this is pretty solid. Quite a few issues here, obviously. Not a perfect movie, but for the most part, I walked away more positive than negative on it. After a second watch, I grew to enjoy some of the positives a little bit more and ignore some of the negatives. I would give this movie a 3 out of 5. Very excited for whatever is going on in Marvel next. And yeah, that is all I got. Goodbye.